My parents left everything to my brother after I spent $75,000 to save their café. 2 weeks later, Mom texted, "Water bill's overdue." I replied, "Ask the new owner." What happened next made them wish they'd never betrayed me. I used to believe that if you gave everything, your time, your energy, your money, people would eventually see your worth. That loyalty would be repaid in loyalty. That family would always stand by you the way you stood by them. For a long time, I lived my life by that belief. I was wrong. My name's Elena Moore. I'm 35 now, living in Austin, Texas, and working as a nurse practitioner. I've spent most of my adult life playing the responsible one, the daughter who always showed up, no matter the hour, no matter the cost. My parents, Caroline and Thomas, are both retired now. My mother used to be a librarian, sharp-eyed and organized. My dad was a firefighter, tough on the outside, but softer than he'd ever admit. They weren't bad people, just people who slowly, and maybe even unknowingly, learned to lean too hard on one child while protecting the other. That other child was my younger brother, Lucas. He's 28, a dreamer, a self-proclaimed musician, though I can't remember the last time he finished a song, let alone held a steady gig. He's bounced between ideas, starting a band, launching a YouTube channel, even trying to sell handmade guitar picks online. Nothing stuck. But every time he failed, they padded the fall. Lucas is sensitive, my mom always said. He just needs time. Time and money and space, apparently. I gave him all of that. I gave them all of that. When my parents' health started to decline, minor strokes, blood pressure issues, and later, my dad's knee replacement, I stepped in. No hesitation. I paid the bills they couldn't, moved money around to keep the lights on, even hired a cleaning service when Mom couldn't get around like she used to. I never made a scene about it. I thought, this is what you do for family. I was earning a good salary, living alone in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, and figured it was just part of my role. The fixer. The anchor. When their roof leaked, I paid for the repairs. When the old cabin by Lake Travis, our family's one real asset, needed remodeling, I funded it. $12,000 for plumbing, $5,800 for flooring, $3,400 for rewiring. I never kept a formal count, but the number sits somewhere above $70,000. Not once did I ask to be paid back. Honestly, I thought they'd never forget it. Turns out, they did. It was a Sunday when everything changed. I stopped by their house with groceries the way I usually did every other week. Mom was out in the back garden clipping roses, and Dad was snoozing in his recliner. The house smelled like coffee and old books, warm and familiar. I put the food away, then noticed the usual stack of unopened mail and documents on the dining table. I didn't think much of it. I always helped Mom with sorting, especially with insurance forms or anything financial. Then I saw it, a thick blue envelope with gold lettering that read, "Last Will and Asset Allocation." My heart didn't sink at first. I thought maybe they were getting their affairs in order, being responsible. That's what adults do, right? I opened it. What I read made my hands go cold. Every major asset, our grandfather's stamp collection, appraised at nearly $25,000. Dad's vintage piano, worth another $30,000. 2 undisclosed investment bonds and the family cabin, now valued at $320,000. All of it was designated to Lucas. And me? My name was mentioned once. One line. We love both our children. That was it. No inheritance. No keepsakes. No acknowledgement of the years I held them together, financially and emotionally. My stomach twisted. I reread the page 3 times, thinking maybe I missed something. I hadn't. I stood there, still holding the papers, when Mom walked in with her gardening gloves still on. "Oh," she said, glancing at the envelope. Her voice dropped. "I didn't think you'd see that today." "Is this real?" I asked, not angry yet, just stunned. She looked uncomfortable. "We just wanted to make sure Lucas had some security," she said softly. You've always been strong, Elena. You don't need help." Before I could respond, Dad shuffled in, stretching like nothing was wrong. He saw the document in my hand and didn't even flinch. "We figured you'd understand," he said plainly, like this was a weather report. "Lucas needs a safety net." That was the moment something cracked in me. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything or storm out. I just nodded slowly, placed the will back on the table, picked up my purse, and walked out of that house without another word. I didn't go back. The silence was immediate. No calls. No texts. No apologies. Until, of course, the next bill came. 3 days later, my dad sent me a message. "Hey, electric bill's due. Can you cover it like usual?" That was all it said. No greeting. No explanation. Just a cold request, like I was their automatic teller machine. I stared at the screen, feeling numb. Then I typed back, "Ask Lucas. It's all his now." That was the day I started cutting the cords, literally and figuratively. I removed myself from their utility accounts. I called the bank and had my name removed from the emergency funds. I even canceled the old auto-pay system I'd set up for their prescriptions. And for the first time in years, I breathed. But the relief didn't last long. Because when guilt doesn't work, people turn to shame. The post started appearing 2 weeks later. Mom shared a Facebook post with a photo of the cabin captioned, "Some children forget everything their parents gave them." Dad followed with one of those long-winded updates about sacrifices and silent heartbreak. But what really got me was Lucas. He shared a smug little video to his Instagram stories, him playing piano in the cabin, smiling, with a caption that read, "Thanks for the upgrade. Life's finally fair." I didn't cry. I didn't lash out. I took screenshots of the will, the texts, the $70,000 worth of receipts I'd kept over the years. And then I posted it all. No dramatic caption, just facts. My silence wasn't approval. It was exhaustion. What happened next surprised me. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years commented in support. Strangers sent messages. Even distant relatives I barely knew reached out, stunned. And then, slowly, one by one, the original posts from my family disappeared. They went quiet. But this time, I didn't feel alone. I felt seen. And that was only the beginning. After everything went public, there was silence. A strange kind. Not peaceful, not loud, just hollow. Like someone had packed up all the noise of my past and shoved it into a locked attic I didn't have the key to anymore. My parents didn't reach out. Neither did Lucas. I didn't expect them to. Once the illusion of control and moral high ground was gone, there was nowhere for them to run but back into their own denial. And honestly, I didn't care. For the first time in years, I had space to think about my own life. Not theirs. Not Lucas's. Mine. I started small. I signed up for a beginner's culinary arts class. Cooking had always been something I loved but never had time for, because every weekend had been for grocery runs, bill sorting, medication pickups, or repairing something at the cabin. Now, my weekends were mine. I felt awkward at first, slicing vegetables beside people half my age, but I started laughing again. I started sleeping through the night. I even stopped checking my phone obsessively for emergencies that never came. I led a few wellness talks at the community clinic where I worked. We focused on boundaries and burnout. I told my patients the same thing I was finally learning to believe. Just because someone is family doesn't mean they're entitled to your soul. My words weren't just advice, they were survival. But peace has a way of being interrupted, especially when the people you walked away from don't know how to handle their own consequences. About 6 weeks after the will incident, I came home one evening after class and found Lucas sitting on the steps of my apartment building. I hadn't seen him since that day at our parents' house. He looked thinner, a little pale, and for once, not smug. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, waiting. "Hey," he said, standing up and rubbing his hands together. "I know you don't want to talk. I just need 5 minutes." I crossed my arms. 5 minutes for what, Lucas? To explain why you accepted everything while I got nothing? Or to ask me to clean up another mess? He looked down, sheepish. I didn't know it would spiral this fast. Didn't know what? I asked, my tone steady. That the cabin would need maintenance? That property taxes exist? That grown-up things cost money? He sighed. The cabin's at risk. Foreclosure. I don't understand the legal stuff. I went to the bank and they handed me a bunch of papers and deadlines and I don't know what they mean. What happened to the inheritance? I asked. What about the bonds? The vintage piano you posed with online? I cashed one bond, he mumbled. Used some for repairs and other things. Other things like what? A new keyboard? A road trip? Streaming gear? His silence gave me my answer. He stepped closer, voice trembling. I didn't think you'd cut us off for good. You were always the strong one. That word again. Strong. A word they had used as a justification to bury me in responsibility while shielding him from reality. I stepped forward and pulled the building door open behind me. Strength isn't infinite, Lucas. And I didn't cut you off for good. I gave you all time to make things right. No one even tried. So, you're not going to help? Not even to explain the bank terms? No, I said firmly. You wanted the rewards. Now live with the responsibility. And I walked inside, leaving him standing alone. A week later, my mom's number lit up my phone screen. I let it ring out. A voicemail came through. Her voice cracked as she said, "We really need your help, Elena. The taxes are overdue, and Lucas doesn't know how to access the account." I can't sleep. I didn't respond. Instead, I logged into every account I'd ever managed for them. Bank accounts, utility websites, medical billing portals. I had written down every password in an old red notebook, tucked away in my closet. That night, I opened the book, stared at the first page, then slowly tore out each one. I threw them in the trash, one by one, like letting go of a part of myself I didn't need to carry anymore. 3 days later, the neighbor who lived next to the cabin, an older woman named Trudy, called me. I hadn't spoken to her in years. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said kindly, "but your mom mentioned you used to handle the property taxes. I think they're in trouble." She asked if I knew any local realtors. So that was it. They were trying to sell, probably hoping to avoid foreclosure quietly. I thanked her and hung up. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel proud. I felt tired. Just tired. A few days passed, and I found myself wandering a bookstore on a lazy Saturday afternoon, something I never used to have time for. My phone buzzed again. Lucas. This time it was a text. "You can't seriously just watch everything fall apart. This is still your family." I read it over and over. Then I typed back, "Family doesn't mean using one person until they break. I'm not your safety net anymore." No reply. The next message came from my dad. "You're going too far. Your mother's health is worse now. We're stressed and aging. You don't turn your back on people like this." But they already had. When they wrote my name out of that will, they turned their backs on me first. Still, something deep in my chest ached. I wasn't heartless, but I had finally learned to protect myself. And I wasn't going back. I began journaling about everything. My pain, the years I lost trying to earn love, the relief of reclaiming my time. That journal slowly turned into a blog. I named it Cutting Ties, Finding Self. I shared my story anonymously at first. Then under my own name, people started reaching out. Strangers. Women and men from all over. Some said, "Thank you for saying what I never could." Others wrote, "This made me feel less alone." And that's when I realized something important. I didn't just walk away from pain. I stepped into purpose. While Lucas was dodging phone calls and mismanaging what he had been gifted, I was building something honest. Something mine. But something told me the storm wasn't over yet. And I was right. I thought they would eventually stop. That after all the posts were deleted, the silence would settle, and they'd find a way to manage on their own. I underestimated them. Or maybe I overestimated their willingness to change. About 3 weeks after my blog started gaining traction, I came home from work to find a certified letter waiting in my mailbox. It was from the bank, mistakenly addressed to me as a secondary contact on the cabin's property records, something I should have removed myself from a long time ago. Inside was a notice of foreclosure proceedings. Apparently, they hadn't paid the property taxes in over a year. The bank was giving them 30 days to make the payment or vacate. I wasn't surprised, just disappointed. That night, I stared at the letter for a long time, remembering the weekends I'd spent repainting that cabin with my own money. The hours I spent on the roof in the Texas sun because Dad's back gave out. The plumbing bills I paid without a word. I thought I was building something permanent, something for the family to treasure. But I was only ever patching holes in a ship they never intended to keep afloat. I didn't call them. I didn't warn them. I wasn't going to do the emotional labor anymore. Still, I knew what was coming. It didn't take long. 2 days later, I got a knock at my apartment door. I looked through the peephole and saw my parents standing there. Not calling, not texting, just standing there, like it was still their right to show up unannounced. I didn't open the door immediately. I stood behind it, breathing. Then, slowly, I pulled it open and stepped outside, shutting the door behind me. My mom looked thinner, her shoulders stooped, eyes puffy. Dad held an envelope in his hand, his face blank but exhausted. "Elena," Mom said softly. "We're out of time. The cabin." "I know," I cut in. The foreclosure notice arrived. Mistakenly sent to me. She blinked. "So you know how serious this is?" "Yes," I said. "I do." Dad cleared his throat. "We need your help. Just until we can sell it properly. We'll include you in the proceeds." I let out a sharp breath. Not quite a laugh, but close. "You're offering to give me part of something I was already written out of? Generous." "Elena, don't do this," Mom whispered. "Please. I know we made mistakes, but we're family." "Family," I repeated. The word you used after giving Lucas everything. After shaming me online. After acting like I'd abandoned you when I was the one holding this family together for years. Dad stepped forward, voice hardening. "You've always been dramatic." There it was. The dismissal. The gaslighting. The same tone they used when I was 16 and begged them not to co-sign a loan for Lucas's failed music school. The same tone they used when I tried to tell them I was burning out 5 years ago and needed help. "I'm not being dramatic," I said. "I'm being honest. You used me. You left me out of your will. You expected me to still show up anyway. We thought you'd understand," my mom said, her voice breaking. "We thought you didn't need anything." I paused, choosing my words carefully. That's the thing. I didn't need anything until I needed to be respected. And you couldn't even give me that. Neither of them had anything left to say. I turned, opened the door, and walked back inside. I didn't slam it. I didn't cry. I simply let it close behind me. After that day, things began unraveling fast for them, not me. The cabin went back on the market, listed at a $50,000 loss. Water damage had spread beneath the floorboards, and no one had done the maintenance. Realtors were walking away, uninterested in a place held together with silence and old memories. Lucas tried to pretend everything was fine online, posting photos from years ago like nothing had changed. But Trudy, the cabin neighbor, called me again one afternoon just to say, he's moved back in with them. I see him running errands now. Doesn't look too happy. I just thanked her. That was all I could offer. I didn't feel joy in their struggle, but I didn't feel guilt either. Meanwhile, my own life was slowly blooming. My blog had reached thousands. Readers were sharing their own stories, their own quiet severances from family that had taken advantage of them. One woman wrote to me, "Reading your words gave me the strength to say no for the first time in my life." I read that message 5 times. I was cooking again, really cooking. I'd even started photographing my recipes and posting them online. A small community began forming around my food, my voice, my story. For once, the version of me people were connecting to wasn't the fixer. It was just me. One rainy Tuesday, I received a thick envelope in the mail. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. Inside was a letter from my mom. A real one. Handwritten, on soft blue paper. It was longer than I expected. Apologies. Regrets. She wrote about the nights she stayed up watching the front door, hoping I'd walk through it. She said Dad didn't talk as much anymore. That Lucas was struggling to get his head around things. That she didn't know how much time was left, but she still wanted to fix things. I read it all. Every word. Then I folded it up and placed it in a drawer next to some old photos, half-written recipes, and travel brochures I hadn't dared buy before. I didn't respond. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because here's what I had learned. You can forgive someone quietly. You can release the anger, let go of the bitterness, but still keep your distance. That's not cruelty. That's survival. The next week, I was invited to speak at a local wellness retreat. They wanted me to talk about emotional labor, boundary burnout, and how we confuse guilt with love. I accepted. I spoke in front of a group of 30 people, hands shaking a little, but my voice steady. I told them what I knew now, that real family respects your no just as much as your yes. That loyalty doesn't mean setting yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Afterward, a woman my age came up to me with tears in her eyes. You just told my story, she said. I've never heard it out loud before. I hugged her, not because I knew her, but because I did. Because she was me, just at a different stage. And somewhere deep down, I knew the silence from my family wasn't going to last forever. People like them, who've always had someone to clean up the mess, don't just change because they fall. They change when they're forced to stay down and figure out how to stand on their own. But I wasn't going to be the one lifting them anymore. And that's when the final message came. Unexpected, short, and colder than the rest. It was from Lucas. One line. You'll regret this when they're gone. I stared at the screen, the words burning. But I didn't reply. Not this time. I read that message from Lucas. You'll regret this when they're gone. And just stared at it, letting the words sit there, heavy but no longer sharp. The old me might have panicked. I might have dropped everything and driven straight to their house, just to make sure no one was hurt, just to prove I was still the one who cared. But the version of me reading that message now, she was different. She didn't react out of guilt anymore. She didn't rush to fix what she didn't break. Instead, I turned off my phone, made a cup of tea, and went back to editing a recipe I'd been working on. Something warm, something simple. Chicken stew with rosemary biscuits. It was going up on the blog that weekend. I wasn't going to let Lucas's message ruin that. A few days passed. No follow-up, no apology, just more silence. The kind that used to eat at me, but this time it felt like space. Breathing room. A necessary stillness. Then came the next surprise. I was invited to host a small photo exhibit at a local café. One of the managers had followed my blog and asked if I'd be interested in showcasing food photography and maybe adding a few of the reflective essays I'd written. I hesitated at first. I wasn't used to putting my work out like that, especially not the personal pieces, but something told me it was time. So I said yes. The night of the opening, I stood there in that cozy, dimly lit cafe surrounded by images of cinnamon rolls, handwritten notes about healing, and moments I had captured in my kitchen that felt like tiny acts of recovery. People came. Strangers, friends, even a few colleagues from the clinic. They looked at the photos, read the captions, and quietly nodded like they understood. One woman stopped at a picture of a cracked teacup, glued back together, sitting in a pool of early sunlight. The caption read, "Sometimes what breaks was never built strong enough to carry your weight in the first place." She turned to me and said, This feels like how I grew up." And just like that, I realized the story I had carried alone for so long didn't belong to just me. It was bigger. It was shared. After the event, I walked home in the chilly air, my coat pulled tight, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Not a loud, dramatic kind of peace. A quiet one. Solid. Real. But as with every chapter in this story, peace never lasted long before the past came knocking. A week later, I got a call from Marcus, a friend of mine who worked in real estate. He sounded hesitant at first. "Elena, I didn't want to bring this up unless I was sure, but I think your parents' cabin just went live on a few listings. Price is down again. Looks like they're trying to offload fast. Word is the wiring's faulty, there's water damage, and they can't afford to fix any of it." I thanked him and said nothing more. After I hung up, I checked the listing myself. There it was. The cabin that I had poured my time and money into, sitting like a broken memory online, photos taken at bad angles, its roof sagging, its paint dull. The asking price had dropped by another $40,000. I didn't feel sorry for them. I didn't feel smug either. What I felt was clarity. That house had never been a home. Not really. It had been a responsibility, a symbol, a trap dressed up as tradition. And now it was falling apart, not because of me, but because without me, no one else knew how to keep it standing. A few days later, I got a message from an old neighbor, Lorraine. She was kind and sweet, someone who'd always tried to stay neutral. She wrote, "Just checking in, dear. I heard Lucas is back home with your parents full-time now. He's been doing the grocery runs, and I saw him struggling to carry bags the other day. He doesn't look well. I think things are hard over there." I read the message. I didn't reply. What was there to say? They had chosen this. Over and over. They had picked dependence over accountability. And now, they were living inside the outcome they wrote for themselves. Still, that small ache inside me, some flicker of the daughter I used to be, made me open that drawer in my desk. The one where I'd placed Mom's handwritten letter weeks ago. I unfolded it again. The words were there. Raw. Apologetic. Pleading. And at the bottom, one final line. "I don't know how much time we have left to fix things, but if you're willing, I'm still here." I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it up again and placed it back. Not out of cruelty. Not out of hate. But because I had finally learned that forgiveness and access aren't the same thing. I could forgive her and still keep my distance. I could wish them well and still protect the peace I fought so hard to build. A month passed. I taught a class on boundary setting at the retreat center. I led a cooking demo for young adults starting over after toxic home lives. I posted a new blog entry called "Leaving Isn't the End, It's the Beginning." And then one night, I took a long walk by the lake. It was quiet. The wind was sharp. I stopped by the water and thought about everything I had lost and everything I had gained. My phone buzzed once. It was a message from Lucas. No threats. No insults. Just one photo. It was of the cabin, now fully empty, a for sale sign tilted in the grass. No caption. Just that. I didn't answer, because some messages don't need replies. I looked out at the still lake, moonlight catching the edges of the water, and thought, this is what freedom feels like. Not easy, not neat, but earned. And even if they never understood what they did, I knew, I remembered, and I let it go. I walked home with steady feet and a full heart. My story wasn't about revenge. It was about return, not to them, but to myself.